You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. We have a lot to dig into, so without further ado, another horrible terror attack was avoided, praise the Lord, after arrests were made today in our nation's capital. Carolyn Leavitt got to the point very quickly today at the press secretary's podium.
And no investigation.
Let's get that right clip up from Carolyn Leavitt. There we go.
And it's why this administration is focused on removing public safety threats from our communities. And in fact, I can share with all of you that last night in Washington, D.C., when arrests were being made, there was an arrest of a juvenile right here in D.C. in Ward 7 for threats to kidnap and injure, receiving stolen property, possession of a large capacity feeding device, unlawful possession of firearms and ammunition. A search warrant was executed, 7 firearms were recovered, and the juvenile was arrested after an investigation was initiated based on social media posts allegedly threatening violence towards a school. So this was a juvenile who was a risk to not just himself, but the community here in Washington, and he was removed from the community last night because of the law enforcement efforts of this administration. And I would also point to the statement of our wonderful First Lady that she released yesterday. She wrote, "The tragic mass killing in Minnesota illuminates the need for preemptive intervention in identifying school shooters. Early warning signs are often evident, with many individuals exhibiting concerning behaviors and making violent threats online prior to their actions."
She's correct. And again, it is very good to see an FBI and an administration which is taking a look at rising threats that are reported and at the very least, having a conversation with the individual. Because the more that we learn out of the situation in Minneapolis, the worse it gets. And when I say the worse it gets, I mean that we are able to confirm that it was, in fact, the shooter's mother of the Annunciation Church and School shooting. The mother of the shooter who signed off on the shooter getting a name change to coincide with his gender transition when he was still a minor at age 17. So as far as the situation right now in Minneapolis, there is still one of the children, I believe a 12-year-old, who is still in critical condition. More from the transgender shooter's manifesto has been translated. Again, a mixture of Cyrillic. I'll say Cyrillic correctly at this point, so as not to aggravate those who know a lot more about languages. But Cyrillic and English, kind of weird phonetic code. More has been translated from the shooter's manifesto, as well as a letter in English to his family. More of the online videos, which were able to be archived before they were taken down by Google and Meta, YouTube, etc. And what we have found is that this was 100% motivated by the manic depression and the loathing hate that comes from this individual's gender dysphoria. That is exactly where it came from. It is the single biggest factor in the shooting that we have found. On page 9, he states that he regrets, quote, brainwashing himself, end quote, with transgenderism and calls it a charade. He says, "I'm sick of my hair. I want to chop it off. I only keep it because it is pretty much my last charade of being trans. I'm tired of being trans. I wish I never brainwashed myself. I can't cut my hair off now as it would be an embarrassing defeat, and it might be a concerning change of character that could get me reported." So from that point forward, he also articulated very clearly his desire to shoot Catholic children. I recommend for a lot of the translation, a lot of the investigation on this, that you go check out Steven Crowder's works. I'm pulling a lot of what I found here from Steven Crowder's X, where he's posted a lot of this in detail. Very excellent reporting, got right to it. And by the way, that is why a lot of people have asked, we've gotten a lot of emails in the last day, a lot of messages on social media, why in this particular shooting has there been so much information that has been released so quickly? 2 reasons. Number one, because of the current administration. FBI Director Kash Patel has made it extremely clear, explicitly clear, what they know about the motives and the background of the shooter. Today he said some updates. The subject left multiple anti-Catholic, anti-religious references, both in the manifesto and written on his firearms. Said the subject expressed hatred and violence towards Jewish people, writing Israel must fall, free Palestine, and in case you said, well, that's just not, that's just anti-Zionist, also saying 6 million wasn't enough, in case you needed a couple of more hints. And then, of course, several slurs exclusively for Jewish people. He wrote an explicit call for violence against President Trump on a firearm magazine, and then states that the FBI investigation is still ongoing, and as promised, will continue to update when able. The other reason, however, that the information regarding this shooting has come out as quickly as it is, there are now people essentially standing by who wait for as soon as something like this happens. They do a ton of social media sleuthing. They find the individual's information and they just start archiving and downloading because they know, as well as you and I know, that it is going to be taken down very quickly. Remember, the Nashville manifesto from the Nashville shooter was immediately hidden. The police chief then said that they weren't going to release any additional information from it or the motive. And as we continue to look through the information regarding this police chief in Minneapolis response, the more it becomes clear that if the individuals on the social media platforms and the Kash Patel FBI were not ready to handle this particular situation, then all information regarding this current shooter would be completely whitewashed and banished to the dustbin of history. And again, case in point comes from the police chief of Minneapolis himself.
And it's why this administration...
Sorry, right clip.
And no investigation, no evidence will ever be able to make sense of such an unthinkable tragedy. That being said...
No evidence will ever be able to make sense of the tragedy. No, the evidence of the manifesto, of what was written in bright white paint pen on the weapon, makes perfect sense of the tragedy. It does. People like saying the word senseless violence. They have no idea what the word senseless means. Senseless means you're not able to make sense of it. You don't understand why they would do it. If they're, for example, if you are cheated on, if you are a spouse and you've been cheated on, and you then go and murder someone in relation to that being cheated on, that adultery, that infidelity, in many states, the murder will be treated differently as a crime of passion, as opposed to a cold-blooded, and that's why it's a cold-blooded, premeditated murder. In this instance, the shooter left explicit characteristics, instructions, diagrams that say exactly why he barricaded the door of the church and then shot in from the window. So that's a direct lie from the Minneapolis police chief, but I'll allow him to continue.
We will do our best to determine and identify a specific motive.
He will not.
What we have seen so far is this is an individual who, unfortunately, like so many other mass shooters that we have seen in this country too often and around the world, had some deranged fascination with previous mass shootings.
This is true. He does have a fascination with previous mass shootings. Some of the shootings that he listed include those that are from other transgender shooters towards Christian communities, like not just Minneapolis, but in Nashville of 2023, in Colorado Springs, in Highlands Ranch, Colorado in 2019, in Aberdeen, Maryland. So if we're going to sit here and pretend that the shooter just had sketches of Columbine, that's not the case. That is just not what occurred. And then one of the reporters, rightly so, asks if there might have been a mental illness in relation to this. Again, the obvious undertone about the individual's transgenderism. And the police chief's response is despicable.
And is there any kind of mental health diagnosis that anyone is aware of?
There is no diagnosis that I'm aware of that I can share. I can tell you we are not aware of any state-ordered mental health commitments for this individual.
Chief, those are two different things. That's two completely different things. Are you aware that mental illness played a role in this? Well, there was no diagnosis and no state order. That is feckless cowardice from that police chief. And the Minneapolis Police Department and the families in Minneapolis deserve better. Radio crew, we have to send you to commercial. We're going to get to a couple of other background pieces of information. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. All right, as we continue on the live stream, as new stats released, I believe today, since 2018, there has been a 730% increase in anti-Catholic and Christian church violence in this country. In 2024, there have been 415 hostile acts against Catholics and Protestants in this country alone in a targeted anti-Christian sense. Which is why it is disgusting to the extreme when you have someone like Senator Amy Klobuchar get on television and smirk her way through saying that, oh, well, you could never pin some kind of an ideology to this. The world may never know.
These kids did extraordinary things, but they never should have been put in that position in the first place.
We're going to get to that in a second. They were beautiful and the layering of adjectives and then suggesting they should never have been there, though they never clarify what that means, but she'll get past it to the ideology nonsense.
He's a madman. He was an all-purpose hater, by the way. Hated groups left, right, you name it.
No, not left and right, but...
there's no way to pin an ideology on this, and I think people should remember this.
No way to pin an ideology. I will remind you that the second there is an individual who shoots up a synagogue, who is a white man, immediately, the cause, the ideology that fueled the hate is readily available, clearly identified. Not even a smidgen of doubt in that particular instance. Sorry, producer Nick clarifying, August 11th is when the data on the incidents of violence against Christians in this country was released. Thank you for that clarification. Then, furthermore, the more we look into the situation, both The Blaze and the Daily Wire have reported that Minnesota Catholic schools essentially begged the governor to make readily, like funds that were already allocated, available to boost school security for Jewish schools, Catholic and Christian schools, private schools throughout the city, to boost school security. Walz did nothing. So for all of the do something people out there, and we're going to talk about this because it is all about the Democrats that have taken less than 24 hours after this shooting to make full-on campaigns, political campaigns, based off of this tragedy, dancing up and down on the terrible shooting that just occurred to push immediate political other siding is insane. It is insane. It is mentally unwell. And it is very transparent to the American people. No one has done more in this situation to campaign immediately on the backs of this and run a little social media tour and network television tour and in-person political campaign tour than Democrat Mayor Jacob Frey of Minneapolis, who, by the way, up until this point was considered unpopular, down in the polls, as other progressives, like the young Somalian man, to take his position as the mayor of Minneapolis. He was unpopular. So now he has taken this directly, and I mean directly and overtly, to appear in public, not with grieving families, but to appear at the moms, demand action conferences, big, huge rallies, and stand outside and to yell at the camera and appear on every single network legacy media outlet on the left side of the aisle. Every single one of them, I think, except the BBC at this point. It's shameless. So to be clear, he gets in front of the country immediately and says, well, I mean, first of all, clearly what we need is a huge, statewide gun ban.
We need a statewide and a federal ban on assault weapons.
We're going to bring the radio crew back from commercial and talk a little bit more about what is probably one of the most egregious acts of a mayor regarding a tragedy in some time. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Jacob Frey of Minneapolis has spent the last 24 to 36 hours going on every single TV show that he can, And I have listened through every single one of his interviews. He has not once said that he and the people of Minneapolis stand with the Catholic community of Minneapolis. And there is a reason that he is saying such. The reason that Jacob Frey, and I want to make this clear up front, the reason that Jacob Frey, the Democrat mayor of Minneapolis, has not said, we stand with the Catholics of Minneapolis, is because by doing so, he would be admitting there was a hate crime which took place. And if there is a hate crime, then there is a group and an ideology which committed the hate in a targeted fashion. Instead, he has used this to say that the real problem is that there are all of these guns in the United States, and that's what did it. Then it's all of these guns. In fact, the real problem is that the U.S. has more guns than people.
Have more guns in America than we have people. The reality is that we have these assault rifles that can reel off 30 clips in conjunction with a magazine before the person even needs to reload.
Wow, 30 clips a magazine. I am begging Democrats to learn one thing about firearms before running their mouths. Just one thing. Just one basic tenet about how firearms work, what they are, what they do. Before you get up and just embarrass yourself. Again, there are real people who need attention in Minneapolis right now. And yet here is Jacob Frey yet again, proving why all he cares about is his political image. And I want to make that clear, because he'll get up in front and he'll say, guys, I mean, he'll use all the flowery language. He'll try to find the one thing no one has yet said, that these were beautiful children who did beautiful things, which, again, people don't talk like that. People say that when they don't know what else to say, and that's understandable. But then when you suddenly do know what to say, and instead it's all of this jargon about how Americans are really bad for owning firearms, there's something a little suspect there. Now, he does know what to say regarding, again, the mental illness that has been clearly documented in regard to the transgender mental crisis of the shooter.
When you talk about compassion, I don't want to tiptoe around the edge of this, but, you know, the shooter's name was in question, the gender of the shooter. No one's really sure what's going on there. 5 years ago.
No one's really sure what's going on there. Yeah, we're going to get back to CNN on this one in a second.
Was Robert, then a name change to Robin. Okay. This is being seized in all corners, as you can imagine, in all sorts of ways.
Republicans seize. Republicans pounce. Oh, how dare they? Not a single article on Democrats pouncing on gun control. Not a single argument on Democrats pouncing on young white males, which, oh, by the way, suddenly he's male to fit that narrative.
And you know that, Mayor, and perhaps that's why when you spoke about this so profoundly and powerfully as you are even here now, but when you spoke about this today publicly, you voiced concern for the transgender community, for the community overall. And obviously, you chose to do that in that moment because you thought it was important. And I wanted to give you a chance to say why you felt it was important to do that in that moment.
So, by the way, as an interviewer, there are times you can absolutely set up your subject to get out of the hole they have dug for themselves. I try very hard not to do this. Even with people that I've interviewed that I've liked that may be involved in some kind of a scandal, I try not to give someone a ladder. I don't hand them a shovel either. I just let them answer the question. But in this case, she's basically giving him the chance to say, I stand with all communities in Minneapolis, black, white, and then, Democrats will say brown as though that means something. Catholics, Christians, Muslims, Jews, atheists. I stand with trans people, straight people, gay people. He could do that. Does he do that? Of course not.
Obviously, I've heard about the rhetoric and the narrative that is being pushed out, but here's the thing. Anybody that is going to use this as an opportunity to villainize our trans community or any community has lost touch with a common humanity.
Oh, the common humanity. Oh, man, I'm sorry. You saying that you love someone because you tell them you can also hear the toaster talking is not love. It is not. If I see you in the street and there is a bus hurtling towards you, and I say, hey, while you're out there, don't forget to tie your shoe, that's not love. That's not kindness. If I say, wow, you're doing a really good job out there in the street, good for you. Man, you're so great not using the sidewalk. You're powerful. You're wonderful. I love you. I'd stand with you, but I'll do so from over here. That's not love. That's not compassion. That's not empathy. suggesting to someone they should lean into the mental illness is not at all how one should treat mental illness. But here we are. Again, you don't tell someone who is anorexic it's a great way to diet. But again, this is all Jacob Frey's nonsense. Now I want to move on to Ilhan Omar and the rest of the media stuff. I mentioned yesterday that at least the statement put out by Representative Ilhan Omar of Minneapolis, that it was a pretty good statement. And it took her less than 3 or 4 hours to completely ruin anything at all that was praiseworthy. So the first thing she did is what all Democrats are doing right now, which is, won't somebody do something? Do something. And of course, the do something is just about the guns.
But what I do not know is why uniquely in America,
not uniquely in America at all,
we have the capacity to not change what we know we can't.
That coming from the lady saying that she stands for Somalia is rather rich, first of all. Number two, the United States, according to the available data, is not per capita the country that is most affected by public citizenry-based mass shootings. France and Norway particularly beat us handedly on that front, as well as at least 10, maybe 11 other countries. That narrative is tired, it is old, but what really, really steamed me about Ilhan Omar's statements about this is that she took this as an opportunity to suggest, because the question that's asked is, wait a minute, Jacob Frey, he's a Democrat. The Minnesota state legislature does in fact have a Democrat majority. The governor of Minnesota, he's a Democrat. So what's the deal? Why haven't you guys done something? And Ilhan addresses that on MSNBC.
But we also have to understand that we live in a union. In Minnesota, we have strong gun laws, but Indiana is not that far away from us. And so we have to recognize as, people who live in the United States.
I'm going to cut her off here because just as a fun little fact here, I live on the I-70 corridor in Indiana. It is at least maybe like an 8.5 hour drive to get up to Minnesota. Even if you only scoot just to the very border of Indiana, if you're driving from Minnesota, that's still a 6-hour drive right next door. Additionally, it looks like from all that we know so far, as far as the firearm being purchased legally, it wasn't purchased legally in Indiana. It was purchased legally in Minnesota. The Minnesota state government gave the shooter the permit to purchase that firearm because Minnesota does not see going through the mental crisis of gender dysphoria as something that might be a mental crisis, manic depressive state. So as far as the do something is concerned, I will say again, Republicans have actually done quite a bit about this by limiting the amount of minors who can participate in the gender dysphoria lean into grand affirmation love fest that exacerbates and inflames these acts of violence. Now, from that point forward, we do have to send the radio crew over to commercial. The worst of all of these, though, is Gavin Newsom. We're going to talk about it on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. Governor Gavin Newsom of California, who you'll remember has been going on his little social media, pretend to be like Trump kind of crusade, whatever. And all the way out in California has decided the best maneuver right now is to join the mockery of prayer and suggesting that, the children were praying in the pews. That didn't save them, which is one of the most caustic, crass, insensitive things to say right now, which is saying something because, again, Jacob Frey is currently running around with his mouth open. But I digress. Carolyn Leavitt addressed the Jen Psaki, the first Biden White House press secretary's prayer comments yesterday. And this is what Gavin Newsom seizes on a little bit later.
And it's why this administration...
Next clip here.
Yes, I saw the comments of my predecessor, Ms. Psaki, and frankly, I think they're incredibly insensitive and disrespectful to the tens of millions of Americans of faith across this country who believe in the power of prayer, who believe that prayer works, and who believe that in a time of mourning like this, when beautiful young children were killed while praying in a church, it's utterly disrespectful to deride the power of prayer in this country, and it's disrespectful to the millions of Americans of faith. And I would encourage Ms. Psaki to pray for these families themselves who need it right now more than.
Again, individuals who have lost children make it very clear, and have made it clear in the last 24, 36 hours, that they welcomed prayer after tragedy. By the way, including parents of those who lost children in prior school shootings. So in this particular instance, Carolyn Levitt's correct. Gavin Newsom decides to quote tweet this and say, quote, "These children were literally praying as they got shot at," end quote. Disgusting. Now, I'm not going to play all of Jen Psaki's ridiculous comments. I will, however, this right before the show, I believe this interview with Will Cain occurred. Here is Vice President J.D. Vance responding to this, again, this thing that the Democrats have decided is their key moment right now.
This is just an unbelievable tragedy. And we have to remember that there are a couple of families who yesterday had the worst day of their lives, and it's not going to get much better from here because of what this evil person took from these families, which is these two beautiful kids. That's my first response to it. My second response to it is I'm praying every single day, multiple times a day, that while two deaths is tragic, 3 deaths is even more tragic, and I hope it stays at 2, because there still are some kids who seem to be in pretty serious condition at the hospital, so we're praying for their swift recovery. And I think on the broader stuff, I mean, look, clearly this person was a mentally deranged human being. Clearly it was a transgender individual. We're going to learn a lot more, and I think the FBI and local authorities got to try to get to the bottom of this. But you don't go and shoot up innocent children unless you are a clearly screwed up person.
We're going to get to some of the rest of that in a bit. I do want to point out, I have seen no articles who talked about how important it was that Kamala Harris, as the vice president, how must she feel when she saw a racially or something like that targeted or sexist targeted attack during her time as vice president. How many times have you heard anyone say anything about J.D. Vance presiding as the Catholic vice president in the midst of these anti-Catholic attacks? You haven't heard anything about that? Yeah, correct. The media's response continued into today. I didn't think the media was going to get worse than they already did. In fact, last night, during my recording of the Top News in 10, I listed USA Today and their coverage as one of the poor expressions because they'd had a lackluster response before. I had no idea it would become so apropos and how awfully those outlets would report on the situation too today. It's even worse. And we have to talk about it. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Got to pick up the radio crew from commercial.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Feels like I'm losing it.
So we'll get back to Gavin Newsom's bonkers rants in just a second. First and foremost, though, the outlets that have been caught just openly lying about things like this today, if you want a very good reason, an excellent, clear, enunciated summary of why Americans have completely abandoned legacy media outlets, it has really far less to do with the politics of, I don't like that you are a Democrat, I like that I am a Republican, I don't like that you are a liberal, I like that I am a conservative. No, not necessarily. Again, there are journos on the left who write for outlets that I do not care for, whom I respect their writing, even though we very much disagree on political sides of things. And there are those on the left side of the aisle whom I know catch the show regularly and respect how at least I bring the reporting side of the arguments and, the news of the day. Now, that said, the New York Times is not among those. The New York Times decided this is how they were going to cover this. Quote, on social media, some conservative activists have seized on the shooter's gender identity to broadly portray transgender people as violent or mentally ill. Well, yes, transgender people are in fact mentally ill. Gender dysphoria, the idea that you were born in the wrong body, is your brain responding to what is considered a neurological imbalance, at the very least, an abnormality. And whether that is hormonal or whether that is a learned behavior, that is in fact the brain not responding properly as it should. In the same way that someone suffering from body dysmorphia or suffering from bulimia or anorexia does. The police did not provide any motive for the attack, but Miss Westman's extensive social media history, I love it. All throughout the articles, none of the media has any idea whether to call the shooter Miss or Mr. In fact, Jake Tapper has a little crisis about it today. Oh man, I sure hope we don't misgender or get the wrong pronouns for the murderer.
As I think people have been pointing out since this happened, you see obviously some real clues here as to what a motive could be, but they're not saying formally what it is yet.
The Minneapolis Star-Tribune, just as another piece of the puzzle as to who the shooter was.
That's a USA Today outlet. Keep that in mind.
Minneapolis Star-Tribune says, according to court records, because there's been some confusion about what the shooter's name was.
Yes.
Robin Westman's mother applied to change her child's name in 2019. It was at one point Robert Paul Westman.
Correct.
But since she identifies as a female and wants her name to reflect that identification, was underage, it's now Robin Westman. Brian Todd, thank you so much. Let's bring in CNN security.
Oh yeah, you got to respect. Oh man, God forbid, we don't honor the mentally ill, insane decisions of the shooter who killed 2 children. So glad to know where the priorities are, Jake. Well done. Again, you asked right after the election in 2024, you asked why Americans no longer trusted CNN. It's not just the cover-up of the Biden mental health collapse scandal. It's this, day to day, your inability to report very basic news and pretend that you can just wish away mental illness by pretending that actually it's a good thing. USA Today, speaking of, by the way, probably some of the most egregious coverage ever, and it is why that every time a USA Today outlet closes, like the Columbus Dispatch, the USA Today or the Kinnett outlets across the country, you'll know them because at the top of the page, it's the light blue and gray text at the top of the paper. Every time one of those outlets close, I smile. And the reason is because of coverage today. The USA Today did not mention the transgender mental health crisis of the shooter once. However, they both listed that ICE is being connected by some experts to targeted church violence, which there's no evidence of at all. Nevertheless, some faith leaders have felt compelled to respond to threatened or actual violence around the country. Again, not actually pointing out real cases of violence against like the Christian school in Nashville, which is just basic reporting. Instead, that, quote, religious denominations are really being pushed to decide how open these spaces are going to be when you have threats of random violence or an ICE raid. Also complaining about the white supremacist in 2015 who fatally shot 9 people for a Bible study at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, and then listed 2 other Christian targeted shootings in 2017 and then in 2018. The last, again, we listed them here on the show for you. Targeted hate crimes against Christians by members like who had the exact same kind of manifestos, the exact same kind of statements, like the shooter in Minneapolis. No mention of them whatsoever. When that journalist is unemployed, the media landscape will be a better place. Learn to code. The New Yorker, who has repeatedly complained about yours truly, the New Yorker also decided that this is the time to blame on the Heritage Foundation, whom the Daily Signal used to be a part of. Because, yes, supporting the Second Amendment whatsoever, yes, that's what did it. Again, even though the motive for the shooting is written in paint pen on the firearm and the magazines, nothing. Now, just again, in other news, because I mentioned Gavin Newsom. Newsom is really in the mood to seize on anything he can at all as a political message. Because all of this for the Democrats is just they're completely aimless. They are wandering around. They have no message. They have no proposals. They have nothing to bring the American people. And so anything that happens in the country at all, they have decided to warp their entire brains around. Before this, Gavin Newsom was suggesting that well, there's not going to be an election in 2028. I mean, it's some unhinged stuff because he believes that Trump is, I guess, going to just declare a Reich in the United States or whatever. Here's Gavin Newsom at Politico.
I'm sick and tired of Democrats being on the losing end in this country and our democracy being on the losing end. We have got to.
Don't know why Democrats are on the losing end. After all, they've said such wonderful things about, Christians and, Protestants and Catholics.
Fight fire with fire.
But I understand that's in Prop 50, but you're not saying you think Republicans are going to stop it.
I don't think Donald Trump wants another election.
By the way, did you hear the scoffing laughter at the Politico comment? Or at the Politico conference to that? Because that's a stupid thing to say. He's not going to step down from power. He believes that he lost the 2020 election, and there by the day is more substantial evidence of shenanigans that took place in that election. At the very least, the obfuscation of the Hunter Biden laptop story days before the election is electoral interference. And Trump still stepped down from power. This is nonsense.
Think for a second I have 24 Trump 2028 hats. His folks keep sending me.
That's just funny. I'm sorry, that's just really funny. They keep sending me jokes. Trump 2028 hats. Oh no. I know a lot of people who still wear Vote for Pedro shirts, but I don't see him running for office. Stupid. He did, by the way, today, because the Trump law enforcement, hard-on crime angle has been so popular with Americans. We're still a little bit far out from the polling data that's going to be reliable on this, but the very few spot polls we have so far show that in states and regions close to Washington, D.C., for example, the support for the National Guard being sent in and actually pretty much eliminating crime in Washington, D.C., in the major metropolitan area, has been rather popular with everyone except for old, white, college-educated, overeducated liberals. Everywhere else is pretty freaking good. Even Mayor Bowser got up in front of the country and saying good things. So Gavin was all but forced today, in his desperate bid to be anything, to be the next presidential nominee, has announced that he's stepping up law enforcement in California, which is hilarious.
Effort that will now take shape on the border division down in San Diego. We're going to advance this effort down in L.A. To other parts of the Central Valley, not just limited to Bakersfield, in partnership with Mayor Go there in San Bernardino. And we're going to expand this operation in a collaborative that continues to include the cities and counties, our partners in the sheriff's office and local law enforcement agencies. We continue as well to work with the federal partners. I'll remind you, in San Francisco,
Well, hey, wait a minute here. That sounds like very pro-law enforcement kind of stuff here. And by the way, I will point out that as soon as he was asked a question about why all of a sudden he's pro-law enforcement, why all of a sudden he's moving in this, particular direction, he ends the press conference abruptly, stutters for about, a minute beforehand.
Effort that will now take shape on the border division.
Red states that you say are higher, and at the same time, we're here because you're surging law enforcement across the state. So, do you believe that crime is a problem in California or not?
Well, sort of a curious question. I made the entire point that crime's an issue, and we want to tackle it, and we continue to do more in that space, and we announced.
Again, I thought that crime wasn't an issue. Crime was down across the board, really down.
And highlighted some of the expansion. What is not contradictory, respectfully, is that we're doing it in partnership with our local communities. We did it in partnership with the Biden administration prior. We're not talking about the nationalization, the militarization of the Guard and militarizing United States cities. So quite the contrary.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. I'm sorry, I got to run. No more questions. Bye. Incredible. Radio crew, we got to send you over to commercial. We're going to continue on the live stream before we bring Virginia on, down from the border. The Mexican government is falling apart. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. One thing that I can't help but share with those over on the live stream, and if you are watching this, I'm very glad, because the podcast side, you're going to need to come see this. Gavin Newsom is doing all of his little photo shoots right now, and he's decided to showcase. When I mean showcase, I mean he has bloused his jeans, or at least sort of, into just like, I guess, showcasing the pair of like Air Jordans that he's wearing, like high tops. Here you go. So he's got like half bloused on. This is from the California Governor TikTok where they're zooming in. Oh, look, wow. Zooming in on, oh, he's so cool. That's from the actual California Governor Twitter or TikTok account. Producer Nick? I'm a little shocked. I thought that was just someone zooming in because they no, this is the actual Gavin Newsom account celebrating his wearing Air Jordans. First of all, it is not 2013. I wore Air Jordans. And then when those were replaced in style by wearing Under Armour, we all swapped to those. I think about 2011, 2012. And they have not been hugely in style since. Good for you, man, I guess. I guess you're going to hit up the court after, I don't know what, tweeting for a few hours. I mean, man, if he's really going for like the trying to imitate Trump, you know, like Trump's going to hit the golf course, he's going to hit the basketball court. I would love to see Newsom one-on-one with Ted Cruz in basketball, just to bring back that classic example. So anywho, moving on to other big news from the day, because it never slows down. The United States economy is doing some pretty decent rolling forward. So right now, the second quarter gross domestic product has been revised up to 3.3%. Inflation has been revised down to 2%, which is on track with the Federal Reserve's target rate. Those are good revisions. So now, if we take a look at those numbers moving forward, very little room for Jerome Powell to kind of shuffle against the Trump administration here. We'll have to see in September how that goes. Additionally, and this is honestly, I'd say this is a pretty cool, at least numerical value so far. Remember one of the key arguments about from the Democrats as to why Trump's tariff policy was bad, not from the right, but from the left, about why Trump's tariff policies were bad. It was going to kill tourism. Oh man, Canadians weren't going to come visit the country. No one was going to visit the United States. No one was going to spend money here. Oh, they all hate us. Right now, 2025 has set a record for the most international visitor dollars spent. And that's not something that just grows every year. But like 2018 was higher than in 2019. And then in 2020, obviously, it took a dip. 2022 and 3 were also low. In 2024, 124.1 billion spent. In 2025, 126.9 billion spent. The year's not over. And it's already beat the record. So as far as some of these narratives, I was told everything was going to fall apart. It's just not happening. Additionally, it appears that pressure on the Trump administration, the Trump team, to not let in additional visas for Chinese students has caused the administration to revise and say, well, actually, we're not letting in more Chinese national students. The 600,000 is the number that it's been. So again, Trump floats an idea and ends up backing off if it's unpopular. And the popular side, that brings us to success on the border. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
A lot of stuff going on in the Gulf of Mexico and the rest of the Caribbean. Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. I'm Tony Kinnett here at the Daily Signal. So I'm sure you know, as we all know, that the southern border is rather quiet at the moment. We're going to bring on Virginia Allen in a moment to talk about what's going on a little south of there. But according to a CNN article just out from either today or yesterday, Immigration Customs Enforcement has now deported nearly 200,000 people since Trump returned to office, on track for the highest level in a decade. So for a lot of people who have been suggesting, underperforming, not actually going out and doing things again, which according to the baseline poll, including independents, mass deportation is wildly popular with the American people. So far, ICE seems to be doing exactly what has been called for by the American people. And the lack of border, the lack of border strength, the lack of, border crossings, the lack of migrations, the lack of corridors open for the cartels has now started causing some internal problems for the 6 major drug cartels in Mexico, which has led to a couple of senators in Estados Unidos de Mexico, not just Estados Unidos in general, throwing a couple of punches today on the floor of the Mexican Senate, which Man, I got to tell you, I was expecting some chaos with Marjorie Taylor and, Jasmine Crockett maybe, or AOC versus any number of individuals on the right in the House. But I mean, hey, the fist fight in the Mexican Senate, let's go. So for the push, give him the push, give him the second push, give him the arm control, do the double twisty. Oh, now he goes for the neck grab. Then the cameraman gets in the way, shoves down the man with the boom mic. Okay. The lady in the colorful shirt gets shoved aside. Let's go. Jerry. What would that be for Spanish? Is there like a Jerry, like Jeremiah in Spanish? I don't know, man. Let's go. Man, it's fantastic. Producer, do you have something?
I just want to point out that wasn't a mic. That's an Insta360 camera on a selfie stick. I want that camera's point of view. It gives you like a 360 perspective. That's why he's using it, is so that they can.
So what you're saying is there's like some Street Fighter footage that exists out there.
It's very high resolution so that they can cut out pictures of the different sections. I want that up close and personal picture.
Mis amigos in Mexico, escúchame. If you can find that footage, we would love to pay you for it in US dollars, so you'll know they're worth something. But anywho, those particular things said, all aside, now over. And down at the southern border where things are a lot quieter, it really gets a lot less quiet when you continue south. Virginia Allen, our senior news producer, she's just back from a trip to El Paso where there are whisperings among the Border Patrol, where there are open fights on the floor of the Mexican Senate. Well, that's not at the border, but that's that little more south stuff. Virginia, welcome back from a much quieter southern border.
Thank you. Good to be back. Fresh off the plane here and came straight to do your show, Tony. So it's great to be with you.
I mean, we're really right up against the time here, so I want to dig right into it here. The southern border areas, we've talked to those representing families who are recovering from years of living on the border, the vandalism, the assaults from those flooding over. Yet some of the footage that you've shared from Tim Kennedy's drones, helicopters, also over the Rio Grande, not a lot of traffic going on these days.
There's not. It's very quiet at the southern border. We spoke with the interim Border Patrol chief for the El Paso sector, Chief Walter Schlosser, and he really detailed how things like ending catch and release and, adding security through cameras, through sensors, through increased border wall, how all of those factors have led to just dramatic decline. He really harped on the fact that, if you don't want people to come, then stop paroling them into the country. He said, that's the biggest factor, that if one person comes and they're allowed to stay, well, then the next day you're going to have 100, the next day you're going to have 200, which is obviously exactly what we saw under the Biden administration. And because the individuals that are showing up at the border, they're not being paroled into the country, they're being turned away. So the word is out, the border's closed, no one is coming.
And that's a huge thing because, again, of course, we were told that you needed a brand new, huge, fantastic, beautiful law and checkpoints every 15 feet and all of these extra lawyers running around. And that's just not the case. Is Border Patrol still on high alert, or have things relaxed a little bit? What's the stance? Again, you and I are usually the ones who the Daily Signal sends everywhere. And so it's how you also see the federal officials, the police, people holding themselves. What's that like there?
Yeah, it's always a joy to get down there and work with the law enforcement, hear from them. How are they doing? Morale is way up. They're very open about that. They're really pleased by the situation. They even said, some days it's kind of slow around here and we get a little restless, but they're remain very much so on high alert. And they really stress that because the people that are willing to risk crossing now, those are the people we really do not want in the country. And the chief that I spoke with, Chief Schlosser, he multiple times really praised the passage of the big, beautiful bill because he said that bill, it includes millions, billions of dollars in order to further secure the border. Those are tools that Border Patrol desperately need in order to really keep up with advancing technology and ensure that the cartels are not getting across, because you don't have these masses anymore flooding and running to Border Patrol and saying, hey, I'm here to claim asylum. But what you do have is gotaways. You have people that are trying desperately to avoid Border Patrol, and they are using all sorts of creative techniques to do that in order to still smuggle dangerous people and drugs into the country.
Now let's talk about that for a second. So again, the 6 primary active cartels in Mexico right now, you have Cartel de Jalisco, Sinaloa, the Gulf Cartel, La Familia Michoacana, Santa Rosa de Lima, the Juarez Cartel, of course. These are the ones vying for control that make Mexico more and more by the day kind of a fallen state war zone. And it has now broken out onto the floor of the Senate, in which there are accusations being made by some party members. Again, fistfights. You hear Jasmine Crockett and MTG, doing a little arguing on the House committee floor. That's a big news day, at least for Congress, for us. But now you're breaking into fistfights. What in the world have you been hearing where you're at about the deteriorating situation, not just on the dusty ground of Mexico, but also in its government?
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is really, really critical. We need the Mexican government to be strong because, quite frankly, the U.S. can't do it alone. The cartels operate out of Mexico. We need the cooperation of the Mexican government in order to ultimately defeat the cartels and not just keep them at bay. And right now, for the law enforcement that are on the ground, they're trying their best, obviously, to employ these new technologies to keep them at bay. And I think a really important point to make here, something that I learned while I was down there, and it makes sense, it's obvious, but the changes at the border, they're really harming the cartel's bottom line. The cartels do what they do. Why? To make money. And they've made literally billions of dollars sneaking drugs and people across the border.
And now there may be less money to spread around to some of those government officials
Exactly.
allegedly bought.
They're getting more desperate. Yeah, more violent.
And that may put Claudia Sheinbaum in a pretty difficult position if some of those allegations are true. Last question I want to ask you with here. I know you have to run, so do we. Do you see the Mexican National Guard up in that kind of not demilitarized, because it's quite the opposite, that border skirmish clearing away zone, that null zone that is supposed to be created in the northern miles of Mexico's border with the United States? What have you seen there? Did you see any Mexican National Guardsmen? What's going on?
Yeah, so on this trip, I did not. We were we were on the outskirts a little bit of El Paso, but I did not see any Mexican authorities. I have on previous trips, though. I will say that. I have on past trips to the border seen them stationed right there. And I think, we need more of that. We need more boots on the ground on both sides of the border wall. That's critical for deterrence.
Well, I won't ask you to speculate on an absence of Mexican cartel. Of course, we could obviously desist into anecdotes, but that's the nature of things. Virginia Allen, our senior news producer at the Daily Signal, thanks for giving us a bit on this trip.
Absolutely. Thanks for being willing to have me on, Tony, and talk about the trip. Appreciate it.
Always. All right, now let's talk very briefly here about the CDC director being fired and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and people leaving en masse. I'm going to say this again. I do not care when individuals who are from a federal agency of some sort, who have made the decision to obscure things from Americans, who worked with, let's say, Randy Weingarten of the American Federation of Teachers, who now have decided with their little pronouns-laced letters of resignation to leave the federal government. I'm supposed to feel bad, or that we're going to have a huge health crisis now? No, I'm sorry. I don't feel that. And as one of the head guys of the crew who, as a former science teacher, I'm not thrilled with a lot of the things that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says. A lot of them, some of them are great, some of them, I'm just not worried about this. The CDC does about as much to keep the United States safe as the Department of Education does for our public schools. So maybe a small amount more. So I know we got that question, that why I haven't really covered it. A couple of resignations and things, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has promised some stuff in the future. When he reveals certain things he's promised, we'll talk about him a little more. So now that particular thing is kind of out of the way, I do want to talk about some beautiful, beautiful things that have been brought to my attention tonight for a little bit of bonus tonus. So what the heck is bonus tonus? You've never joined us before. Bonus tonus is the stuff that I cannot fit into the network hour that we are allotted by the FCC and all of the wonderful program managers and our syndication partners. Now, recently, there have been more stations that have been sticking around with us after we're done, which is kind of cool. So those who have done so, we really appreciate it. There's a couple of things that you have sent in directly and some other big news that Again, I would love to fit everything in. Every single news day is stuffed with far, far, far too much. So, first up from the New York Post, dark money groups have been paying pro-Democrat influencers up to $8,000 a month, according to who? According to some conservative watchdog group? No. According to Wired magazine, the Chorus Creator Incubator Program, which sounds freaking weird. That sounds like a fertility program for people who watched Glee. The Chorus Creator Incubator Program is said to be funded by, quote, the 1630 Fund, a nonprofit sometimes portrayed as the left's answer to the Koch network, and which has funneled money to dozens of Democratic-friendly influencers. Now, this is where things get really enjoyable. You know that Olivia Giuliana? Okay, well, I want you to picture the DNC. Now picture the person in the DNC who looks like a water buffalo, who they assigned to reach young men, who's really obnoxious and awful. That's Olivia Giuliana. You maybe didn't realize who she was before. Maybe you don't speak ogre. Common problems when identifying Olivia. She is one of the Gen Z activists who's been receiving this money from this very weird network, who's been pumping dollars in, as well as Lauren Piretra. Piretra, you know who this is? She's a former Playboy executive. Ah, yes, the morals. Turned Occupy Democrats YouTuber. Ah, Occupy Democrats. I know Occupy Democrats. Their head, Grant Stern, refuses to go on the air as a co-panelist with me because the last time we went on air together, I humiliated him so terribly there was 20 seconds of airtime because he ran his mouth about Tim Walz. And as a former science teacher, I always bring receipts. So that would be this goofball. Who else? Suzanne Lambert, who knows, who styles herself a Regina George liberal, slit my wrists. Ariel Fodor, a teacher with 1.4 million TikTok followers. Sander Jennings, the TLC reality star, and older brother of trans influencer Jazz Jennings. Ooh. And then finally, David Pakman, who they just call host of a YouTube show. Now, specifically, David Pakman, I really enjoy seeing in this particular list. And there are two reasons why. Number one, because about a year and a half ago, David Pakman and I shared a C-SPAN debate for about an hour over the 2024 election, in which he said such memorable things as, there is no evidence whatsoever that Joe Biden has dementia, and you are not qualified to diagnose him with dementia or Alzheimer's. And then I said, everyone who has ever been around a person with dementia who's taken care of a person, you see a lot of the same patterns here. No one's saying that diagnosis is the case. And then he tripled down on it. It was really funny. So this individual, who then, so obsessed with yours truly, cut like 4 different videos of our debate, hyper stylized the thumbnails so that my face, because, you know, if you like stop mid frame, you can have my face, you know, whatever, some kind of shock like that. And then posted it, you know, ever. It's like, oh, dunking on this conservative, like small time radio podcaster. Oh, very, very small time. Well, I'm happy to tell you 2 things. Number one, we don't take $8,000 a month in dark money influence groups. Back when the show was owned exclusively by WIBC, I was paid $10,000 per year for the show. I did it because I enjoy doing it. And, oh, by the way, I couldn't help but look at the podcast ratings today. So on Apple Podcasts Politics rating, which is the primary category for both of our shows, he is ranked number 41. Not a bad place to be. And the Tony Kinnett cast is ranked 13th. So, sucks to suck. I bet that the funders of your little show, to substitute for the audience you apparently don't have on podcasting, are thrilled. All of that money can only get you to number 41. So moving on from that particular whatever, that also brings us to some other upset officials from around the country and the world, from India this time. So according to several outlets in India, this according to Tyler Durden, Indian officials are officially calling for intervention after the United States has blocked foreign trucker visas. So as you will recall, About 2 weeks ago, an illegal alien truck driver of Indian origin killed 3 people by making an illegal U-turn on a Florida turnpike, then got out of the semi and acted like nothing was wrong and he was bored by the whole thing. And it was a cause for a problem, not because the guy was from India, but because there is a number of unfettered illegal immigrants into this country for work visas who do not speak the language, who do not understand American road signs, who don't follow rules of the road, who have not assimilated into American culture. And they are hired by trucking companies. In this case, this guy was someone who should not have had a license in the first place. And once they're brought into the country, trucking companies of ill repute, well, they hire them because they can pay them less money. They're not going to pay taxes in the same way. They'll lie on some couple of forms. Presto, there you go. And in regard to this administration, they've now limited visas coming over for work for truck driving specifically from countries like India, who send over a lot of people who don't speak English, who don't assimilate. And Indian officials are mad about it. Why are you upset about it? I'm very confused. Whenever a country where a lot of people emigrate from gets upset that we're limiting immigration, it confuses me. Do you not like these people? And if you don't like these people, why do we have to take them? If they're so wonderful, why don't you give them jobs in India? Harinder Singh, 28, faces 3 charges of vehicular homicide and up to 45 years in prison. Since his arrest, 2.2 million have signed a Change.org petition calling for Governor DeSantis to commute Singh's sentence if he gets convicted, which is really funny because the majority of signatures appear to come from Indian nationals and suspected spam and bot accounts. I will remind you all for the 800th time that social media engagement is largely false. There are some things that are harder to fake, like podcast download numbers. There are some things that are very easy to fake, like Twitter engagement. It's very, very, very easy to fake. It's why advertisers, for example, don't really put a lot of effort into worrying about Twitter presence. There are now Indian officials in local governance as well as members of their parliament, their legislative body, that are now issuing complaints that the United States is engaging in what they call openly racist and xenophobic behavior. Okay. Two more things. I want to make I do want to get to this before we get to the end of the evening here. First of all, some of the online transgender advocacy since the horrible shooting in Minneapolis yesterday. Again, if the trans community is as healthy as is claimed, some of these statements and videos, articles that producer Nick has cobbled together, not doing him any favors.
I'm so sick of this, y'all. This shouldn't happen. There's no excuse for this. And it seems like school pew-pewing season starts earlier and earlier every year. And we just allow it. I feel terrible for the kids. I feel so bad for not just the victims, but the people who witnessed it and will now have to live with that for the rest of their lives. I don't feel bad for their parents.
I don't feel bad for their parents. Something that a mentally well person might not say.
This happened at a Catholic school. There should have been no children there at all. We know what the church does to kids. So.
Oh, that is such a bold statement to make. That is such a bold statement to make.
Oh. I feel terrible for the kids. May the universe protect them from their Catholic parents. And the church. Y'all can shove your thoughts and prayers right where the brightest of the suns don't shine. So far up that black hole of yours that even your God can't see 'em or hear 'em.
Always the your God. Always just the anger at God in general. That just appears to flourish.
Because I'm all out of compassion for Christian nationalists.
Oh, all Catholics are Christian nationalists now. Now, I do know you said at the end of the video, drops an F-bomb, so I'll cut it right there because there's 5 seconds left. Oh, there are posts all over social media from verified accounts of individuals in the transgender community who are saying the same thing. Almost verbatim. Not a target. Oh, again, there's no evidence out. Oh, no, there's no evidence for some kind of a targeted attack against Catholics, against Christians in general. Oh, heavens. You said you had a couple of articles. You wanted to mention maybe one of them?
Yeah, throughout the process of preparing coverage for the recent events, I was prompted to look into some of the incitement beforehand. We had talked so much about the media, the coverage of kind of trying to dissuade any looking into about the transgender past of the individual. In turn, I was curious about the media's hand in actually bringing these people to violence. So I found a few article titles. The first one by PBS, 6 Ways Trump's Executive Orders Are Targeting Transgender People.
Oh, okay.
ACLU, Trump's Assault on Transgender Rights.
Okay.
ProPublica, the Trump administration is promoting its anti-trans agenda globally at the United Nations.
All right.
And the Human Rights Watch, Trump administration moves to reject transgender identity, rights.
I can't possibly fathom why, again, inflaming and fear-mongering at individuals struggling from mental illness would possibly turn out as it has repeatedly.
Which was directly referenced by the individual who carried out the shooting within their documents, was they had referenced that the world was cruel and that they had felt directly attacked by society at large.
There are, I'm gonna have to move on from that one. There are two other really gross things that have also come out. One from the kind of wonk left, and then one from like the hyper weird side of, I don't even want to call it the right anymore because it's horseshoe theoried around to the left. But anywho, first of all, this is from a guy named Alan Levanovitz, who posted a picture of his hand, and he has 8 or 9 cartridges in his hand, bullets, and says, "Walking down my block and found bullets scattered on the street. Gun culture in America is ridiculous. For most gun owners, guns serve the same purpose as New Age crystals or nutritional supplements, empowering charms to make you feel safe. But unlike crystals, they kill." And then, because, of course, this is actually a plug for him to share a bunch of essays that he's written that no one else really has because they're garbage. So people have been dunking on this individual all afternoon, deservedly so, because you may notice a couple of problems. First of all, those are not fired bullets. Those are not fired shell casings. Number 2, I have never, ever, ever seen just full rounds, much less 8 or 9 rounds of them, just lying on the street. Later on, he's been called out for this. In the comments, he's like, well, actually, I found these 7 scattered about, which, again, makes no sense because they're all the exact same make and model of 9mm. And then last but not least, my personal favorite of this absolute idiot's failure to remember one of the most basic rules of conning, which is that if whatever it is you are trying to pass off as real looks brand new and fresh, that is an instant giveaway. To quote Catch Me If You Can, when Leonardo DiCaprio is waiting at the office, the girl comes up to hand a fake note to the secretary. He said, "Hey, where's the crease in the note? That's a fake note to get out of class, right? Where if it's real, what's the first thing your mom does when she hands you a note? You fold it and you put it in your pocket. If that's a real note, where's the crease?" For those of you aspiring con artists out there, if you are going to post a picture of bullets strewn across the ground, brass, which the casings of bullets are most often made of, those certainly are brass. Brass is a soft metal. It is a soft metal. Bullets which are strewn across asphalt concrete that have been left there, again, not 5 minutes ago, will be scratched up. Those are all pristine, brand new, out-of-the-box cartridges that still have the reflective sheen. Brass also slightly oxidizes, especially like unfired brass cartridges like that. Out in the air, even a couple of hours, maybe even like a day or so, though that metal would cloud over. So again, no. And that's not the only stupid social media posts. The others come from Candace Owens. And there has been a small crew online who have suggested that this Minneapolis thing, this is all a false flag op. I will remind you that Candace Owens claims to be Catholic, who claims, by the way, there are Christians being targeted right now. But the only time Candace appears to talk about Christians being targeted is when she says it's at the hand of Israelis and the Jews. Other than that, a couple of things there. In this case, one of the most egregious and stupid. So this, first of all, this is morally wrong. Second of all, this is morally illiterate and just basically illiterate. Candace Owens' theory about the Minneapolis shooting is the government is behind this. Each shooting is more traumatizing than the last because the goal is to scare us into compliance. I'm sorry, I'm going to make this point right in the middle here. By what measure is this shooting more traumatizing than the last? What scale are you using? If we're talking about the number of deaths in a shooting, horrible that there were 2 that were shot and killed. Compared to other shootings, like the Marjorie, the Stone Douglas shooting in Florida, there were many more that were killed in that situation. Just a gross thing to do in general. But in this case, again, a horrible situation, but depending on most scales you would use, not the case here. But we'll continue through it. It is tried and true strategy of 9/11 and the Manson murders, both CIA operations. Do not ever agree to hand over your Second Amendment rights, which she tags on at the end there. The government is behind it. What a just scum. What bottom pond scum. And it gets worse because, of course. So she posts when the transgender shooter was revealed. This person was created by a doctor. From what we know, not necessarily. From what we know, not a doctor did not likely do this. We don't know yet. But this person was created by a doctor. These are the fruits of a deep state military experiment that has been going on since the 60s. That is why all of these shooters are exactly like the ones before. It's a factory. What a disgusting thing to say. And by the way, also a thing that I might add diminishes the anti-Catholic, the anti-Christian hate that pervades certain groups in this country. Again, the instant that there might be a person who has a Jewish-sounding last name, Steen, Berg, Meyer, all of a sudden it's, looks like that anti-Jewish, looks like the Jewish hate is here again, And then when there was an obvious open anti-Catholic atrocity right here, not a word. Not a word. All deep psyop operation stuff. Other major commentators right now in the same vein have also, as of right now, not posted a single word about this shooting. Who are big, huge culture commentators who have spent all of their time in the last couple of weeks covering Israel, covering Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and have criticized other people. Why do you spend so much time talking about Israel? Don't you care about the United States? Hasn't said a word about the horrible shooting in Minneapolis yet. Just asking questions. These idiots. Again, the reason it's called the horseshoe theory is that when events like these happen, these individuals on the far left and the so far off that I don't even consider them in a lot of ways to be on the right, completely loop around and join hands with some of the biggest idiots on the planet. When Taylor Lorenz and Candace Owens are walking hand in hand, ding dong, something ain't right. Literally. All right. Those things said, I did want to give a bit of special thanks here at the end of the show before I forget. Important. There have been several people this evening who have been really, really generous. Extremely kind of you. Jeff USMC gave 2 gifts, 2 super chats. Very, very kind of you. He also had a really funny line about the fist fight in the Mexican Senate. That wasn't a boom mic. That was a stick to hit the piñata. That was really good. And then Psalm 91 and Elmore Mundell also gave super chat gifts. We want to thank. We try to keep track of those. We really do appreciate those of you who have. It's not something that we ask for. You're welcome to join our Discord. The link is in the description below. Of course, you can also shoot a message to us over. You head to tonykinnett.com and there's a little message portal there. Those things said, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Hopefully tomorrow there will be some better news to round out the rest of the week with. Thanks again a ton. Hope you have an excellent evening. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.